All right, it is 2 o'clock, so I think we're going to get started here. Um, Welcome, everybody. I'm coming to you live from sunny, beautiful Havertown, Pennsylvania today. Our session here is using XPages and Bootstrap tabs to build a monolithic single-page application of micro front ends. That's a bit wordy, but hopefully you'll see that that's kind of intentional. Of course, we cannot have conferences like this without all of our wonderful sponsors. So please take time during the next couple of days to visit their respective websites, check out their respective products, and thanks to all our sponsors for making this happen for us. So about me, I'm a senior developer at Mutual Boiler Re. We are a customer. We're not a business partner, so we're a customer that pays for the product and uses it on a daily basis. Myself, I've been developing in Domino for over 20 years, and I think, as we have all seen at these conferences, that tends to be kind of the average. So a lot of us have been doing this for a pretty good amount of time. I was fortunate enough to be selected as an HCL ambassador for 2021. Partly on the strength of my blog there, xpage.me. It's been a little dry recently, but I'm hoping to pick things back up with that, especially with some of the stuff that I plan on showing you today. And I'm also on Twitter at Michael G. Smith. So about Mutual Boiler Re. So as I said, we are a customer. The Re stands for reinsurance. We are your insurance company's insurance company. And we specialize in insuring equipment breakdowns. So what that means is we have a commercial side and a homeowner side. So on our commercial side, anything from equipment at a dry cleaner to pressure vessels, heaters, that type of stuff. And in your home, HVAC units, hot water heaters. Some of you who are joining us from the US, some of you might check your homeowner's insurance policy and see that there is an endorsement on there for equipment breakdown. And we are one of the leading providers of that in the country. And here at Mutual Boiler Re, we have been using Lotus Notes and Domino as our primary application stack for 25 plus years at this point. And a lot of times it feels like when you're on Domino, there's just a lot of stuff going on around you, different technologies, but we are firmly planted inside the Domino world. We are not giving up our house. They can build as many different highways around us as they want, but we are staying with Domino. So back to the title of our presentation here. So again, very wordy, using XPages and Bootstrap tabs to build a monolithic single-page application of micro front ends. So let's examine each of these and just get a quick definition to understand what we're talking about here. So again, here I just pulled this off of the web, a simple explanation of a monolithic application. I think it's something as developers we've all been hearing for a long time. A lot of times the idea of a monolithic application tends to be applied to mainframe applications and stuff like that. So a single page application, on the other hand, is, you can almost say it's all the rage now. A lot of applications are single page applications. These are a lot of the technologies that are used to create single page applications, at least from the front end side. And as evidenced by the screenshot here, a big component of that is responsiveness. So, and these front end applications or these front end technologies can tie into any backend. Domino, Spring Boot, MongoDB, Node.js, all that type of stuff. So if you're an XPages developer, you might be thinking, well, doesn't XPages already provide us the ability to create single page applications? We have partial refresh. We have scope variables to help us store information temporarily. manage beans, REST services, and X agents to communicate back and forth with the server to help us maintain that single page look and feel by just making calls to the server to get the data we need and updating the part of the screen that we need to update. And of course, remote procedure calls as well, which kind of tie into REST services and X agents a little bit. So what exactly is a micro front end application? Admittedly, this is a relatively new term to me. As I was preparing this presentation, it kind of developed. And if anybody has a keen eye, they might realize I actually changed the description of this presentation from what it was originally. So, but really, I guess the idea of a micro front end application is giving interdependence to teams, so you're not stepping on toes trying to combine code and business processes and that type of stuff. And this is just a little visual to kind of help you see what the difference might be between a monolithic application and a micro front end application. So, talking about these three different types of ways of building an application, you might think, how could someone want to combine all of these into one application? Well, here at Mutual Builder Re, we tend to do that. And looking at this screen here, this is actually a screenshot from our production application that our users use every single day. I'm not a claims examiner, so I don't happen to have any data on my dashboard here. And if you're familiar with Bootstrap, everything here will look fairly familiar. So you have your primary navigation at the top of the screen. And then we have a set of secondary navigation tabs here as well. And then kind of like a shameless plug here, we have the flexible view control for XPages, which is one of my other projects that you may have heard me speak about or seen blog posts about. So that is a big component of our application here. So while that screen looked fairly simple, there's actually a lot going on here behind the scenes. So when our application loads, it starts with a very simple XPage, main.xsp. As our users are using the application, their address bar never changes. It's always pointing to main.xsp. And on main.xsp, there's actually very little information that gets loaded. One of those is that primary navigation that I showed a minute ago. So main.xsp loads, our primary navigation loads, and the next thing that happens is we load an iframe with another XPage, and that is our dashboard. Every single user has a dashboard. Dashboards are specific to the functions they perform. I think we have anywhere from 8 to 10 different dashboards that a user might see. So main.xsp loads, some sort of evaluation is done to determine which dashboard the user is supposed to get. And then that is presented here as part of the secondary navigation. So this XPage loads, and then it loads another iframe inside of it. So we have an iframe inside of an iframe inside of an XPage. And then that other part of the screen that we just saw a moment ago. So that's how this application is constructed when users go to the URL for the first time. And so again, here it is again. So all those pieces here is you have an XPage, an iframe inside of an iframe. So when I think about that, I tend to think of the movie Inception. It's one of my favorite movies of the last 10 or 15 years. And I can't help but get these types of images out of my mind. So I tend to always associate with Inception. And just like in Inception, you have these endless worlds that get built inside of dreams. With this application, we can build endless worlds inside of different iframes. So on our primary page here, we have our top level navigation. And every time one of these primary navigation links gets clicked, it opens up another iframe inside of, next to that dashboard iframe. So, and on the secondary navigation, same thing. Every time one of these tabs is clicked, if the iframe does not yet exist, it gets created. And then as you click back and forth, it just activates the particular iframe that was selected. So as our users move throughout their day, their page could very easily end up looking like this. They have their main.xsp with an iframe, with another iframe, and another iframe, and then iframes inside of iframes. And this is actually a fairly simple representation of what our users go through in a day, because we have people in our claims department that are opening and closing claims all day. We have people in our engineering department which are opening other documents. They're opening many documents at once because they have to compare them and try to find the right one for the particular task that they're doing. So it's very important in our application that users are able to process different pieces of information at the same time. Whereas in a typical single page application, you might still only be focused on one thing at a time. So I started explaining why we're building this type of framework, and the roots of it go back to our original Notes client application, which its infancy goes back 25 years, as I referenced. So, and over time, this Notes client application evolved and modules were added. And so ultimately, with our web-based XPages application, we've been rebuilding this, making it better where we're able to with the modern technologies. But this is the root of everything. So why do we build this framework? Again, to kind of rebuild what we had, because our users have come to expect that. That's a typical way users use the Lotus Notes client. They can open many documents at one time and flip back and forth very easily. So it was very important that as we were building the web-based version of this application, that users were not losing functionality as much as possible. There's certainly plenty of functionality we were able to add. We also wanted to minimize the amount of functionality that was lost. So we wanted to maintain an SPA feel. Managing multiple browser tabs within one application is difficult. I mean, we've all been there. You're using an application, you're getting pop-ups, different tabs are opening, then you're not sure which tab you're on, then you have the same document open on two different tabs, and you updated this one, but you thought you updated the other one, and you save it, and what changes you thought you made were not saved, or you end up with a conflict of some sort. So we wanted to avoid that type of confusion, because, like any organization, our users run the gamut of, their abilities, their technical abilities. And also, not only having the ability to open different documents, but, going back to that top level navigation, our users bounce around to the different modules inside the company. So just because someone is in the claims department doesn't mean they don't need to go look at information that's part of another department. And so I actually first started playing around with this concept. My gosh, it must be close to 15 years ago when IBM started pushing One UI. That became the de facto design standard for IBM, pre-XPages even. And I built kind of like a prototype. I wish I had a copy of it that I could dust off and see how well it still works, but that's where the roots of that began. So how does all this work? So there's kind of a tab engine behind the scenes here, and I call it Flex Tabs. So to implement this, there are a couple of requirements. So you have to have Bootstrap, obviously, and jQuery, which handles a lot of the JavaScript aspect of things. But the actual Flex Tabs code is pretty small. So these two files is all you need to add. And even then, there's probably a lot of cleanup that can be done. Like I said, it is uncompressed, but I also have a lot of debugging statements, especially, of course, in the JavaScript file. So once that was cleaned up and compressed, I could easily see that getting below 10K. So what are some of the features that come along with this? You know, not just opening different tabs and there's other little additional nuggets that enhance the UX of this tab environment. So for one thing, if you're going to start opening a bunch of tabs, you better have a way to manage that. So if you have 3 tabs open and then you flip back to the middle tab, when you close that middle tab, a decision has to be made which tab is supposed to be activated next. So there's kind of like a tab manager that keeps track of that stuff. And as you'll see as we move on to some examples, the tab text can be customized. So being used to using the Notes client, you know that you can customize the text to a degree, but you're kind of hamstrung with how much information you can actually fit on one tab. So I think we're going to see some cool stuff with that. And this is a 100% front end solution. So, if and I'll get to the next point about that in a minute. But so as we saw with the iframes, you theoretically could go as many levels deep as your browser can handle before it falls to its knees and begs for mercy. So, and I'll show you here in a minute, the screenshot here, we actually go 4 levels deep. So there's actually 3 levels of iframes on this page right here. You have your main page here, and then you have an iframe, and then you have another iframe, and then you have another iframe. So some might think that this is lunacy. There's times I thought it was lunacy as I was building it, but at the end of the day, it works absolutely beautifully. So just continue with some of the features here. We can go many levels deep. Even though this was built inside of XPages with very minimal changes, this is something that could be applied to any stack to create an application, as long as you're using Bootstrap. And it does integrate, as I mentioned previously, with the flexible view control for XPages, which I believe I'm now calling Flex View. Why I didn't do that from the beginning, I don't know. But Flex Tabs, Flex View, they kind of go nice together. And there's also another feature here, which I will be demoing in a minute, where you can, as you're, we have a big application. So as I mentioned, users bounce around to different modules. But maybe they have a document open somewhere and they made changes, and they need to be cognizant of the fact that they need to go back and save it. So you'll see we keep track of open documents, give users a visual representation of that. So that was a shameless plug there for my view control. So how do users or external users, developers, get a hold of Flex Tabs? The good part of doing presentations like this is it kind of forces you to get your code cleaned up and potentially even make it available to people. And I'm much closer today than I was a few days ago at doing that. So I can see me having a GitHub project up here very soon, or an OpenNTF project, or both, and making this available for people to get their hands on, should they be willing to, or should they be interested in trying it out. All right, so let's take a look at some demos and see some live action stuff here. A minute to get my bearings here. Okay, so as this is actually our live application where I had a screenshot of. This is live. This is the same application that my users are using right now on the same network. So you can see as I click around to these different modules, I get a different representation on each screen. And I need to make sure I don't show any customer information, so I'm going to close that. But this is an actual kind of like a demo database that not only in lively demonstrates the capabilities, but is also a informational resource as well. And I do have a version of this online. I've made many updates in the last couple of days in preparation for this, as I mentioned. So everything you see here will be somewhere online with a link that anybody can access, hopefully very, very, very soon. So you see our application here looks similar to what we just saw as part of our actual internal application. And so by default, I'm just loading a document here. So I have a bunch of different documents in here that I want to show. So how does it work? So you can see different tabs are opening as I'm doing this. And here it kind of shows you like using the Dev Tools Inspector to look at some of the elements and look at some of the values to kind of help see how this stuff is functioning. So getting started link kind of shows you, okay, it's pretty simple. Again, going back to that main XSP, you just need Bootstrap tabs and that type of stuff. Configuration link. So this is kind of the meat of things here. So when you're opening a tab, you're calling tabs.loadTab and you're passing the relevant options in. As I say, GitHub project, hopefully coming soon. So this is just a screenshot out of Designer showing you the different functions that live inside of the tabs object. And again, load tab is kind of the key one there. Okay, so using load tab. So anytime you see any of these tabs opening, this function is getting called, and it's just a matter of what parameters you're passing to it. In this case, this is the actual function that I'm calling. So you can see very little of this is hard-coded, and there's a lot of evaluation to determine what some of the different values should be. And if I turn on my inspector, you come in here and you inspect an actual tab. This is where you see some of these different values that get computed end up getting stored in different attributes of the actual tab. So it makes it easy for the tab to communicate with what I call the tab body. So you have to remember these tabs are at a different level than the actual content. The content is inside of an iframe. So it was fun, I guess you could say, developing a method so that those two are able to communicate to each other. Because if anybody that's used iframes, I'm sure has potentially struggled, trying to have that iframe talk to a parent or having the parent talk to the iframe and exchange information. So displaying a view. So what's interesting about this screen here is this page that again is in an iframe is in a completely different NSF. So I'm able to do that by going back here, and while this is not the actual call, actually it is, I'm sorry. So you can see this source parameter here. By providing a value here, I'm able to point my iframe to a different NSF. Otherwise, everything is going to be sourced from the current NSF. But this is where kind of like the worlds open up a little bit. And you can really get into that micro front end type of application design where you can have one team working on one project. They're working independently. They're managing their builds, and they're not harming any other part of the application. They can work, they can go work in a silo if they want. And then when they're ready to plug in, you know, everything is in a different NSF. So from within the view here, I could open Word documents. So I'm opening a document from one NSF and displaying it in the UI in a different NSF. So that's kind of like the strength of what we're getting here with this. So, and I'm sure you have observed at this point some of the different things going on with the tab text as well, and we will show that in a minute. So we just talked about opening a tab. How about closing a tab? Well, it looks like I forgot to build something, but I did have, usually inside of our main app, there's usually just an exit button. And within that exit button, this is what it looks like. It's really just, it's one call. Again, it's communicating with the parent because these tabs live at the parent level of the content. It's just calling the tabs function. So that the tabs object, that's another important part of this, is the tabs JavaScript, the tabs CSS, it gets loaded at every level so that those functions are available at each level, because again, you don't know how many levels deep you're going to go. So that code needs to be there. So again, just one simple line here. It's interrogating an attribute and passing it to a function, and then the function does the rest. It deletes the iframe. And again, that's where the tab manager comes back into play, because the tab manager is called to say, hey, which tab do we have to show now that we close this one? So there's some different pieces that are kind of working together to make all that happen. So not only can you close it from a button, but you'll notice up here, some of these tabs have a little X on them. So not only can you close a tab from the content level, you could also close it from the tab level. So in this case, you can see it kind of gets embedded here. We don't need to call the parent. We're just calling the tabs.destroy at this level. So again, that's why we need that tabs code at each step of the way. Let me close some of these because the screen's getting a little busy. See, I can click around, click back and forth. I can back up to the view. So same thing, I just can create a new document here inside of this other NSF. Not much different than opening a regular document. But again, this X page that you're looking at is in a completely different NSF than the rest of this stuff. Now, of course, all of the browser rules apply to this. You need to be in the same domain and that type of stuff to make sure that this stuff is functioning correctly. Okay, so I put a reminder. This is actually, there's no content here, but I did this specifically to put a reminder to demonstrate. So I talked about the tab manager. The tab manager simply keeps track of a variable. And actually, I'm on top here, so I need to get to the proper level, which is here. So you can see I have an array of all the different open tabs that I have. And I'll take note of this last one here, which is this particular tab. So if I activate a different tab, that value will change. The last value becomes something completely different. So again, whatever the active tab is going to be the last item in this list. And once that gets removed, it would move automatically back to this one. So if I close this, it went back to this tab, which is exactly what we wanted to do. tracking open documents across modules. Again, this is just a placeholder for me to show you. So if you may have noticed up here under the primary navigation that this number changes depending on what goes on here. So I'm closing tabs, that goes down. This is great if a user is working in a completely different module. And I can see, I've got 4 open documents here. Just our users have found it to be beneficial as they're managing their workload. So just a little added nugget. Customizing the tab text. So you could pass just plain text into the tab text. You can pass HTML, as you can see here. So not only are we styling HTML using a different font, bolding, font size, adding a font awesome icon. And there's a couple ways that the tab text can be updated. So if I go back to the load tabs function, I'm not using it in this call, but if I simply just add the title parameter, it's kind of like a two-way thing. You can, when you're opening the tab, you can set the text, or in this case, also the title HTML that's going to appear there. Or when the page opens, you can make a call back again to the parent tabs object and say, update this tab with this content. So that comes in handy if your load tab link is opening a document and you don't know anything about that document yet because it's not open. Then on the actual document that gets open, and this is a good example here, this is simply reading from this content here, calling back to the parent tabs object and saying, put all of this content in the tab. Not much different than what we do when we open a notes document and we're setting the title information there. So looking at this another way here, this is an example of what you might put on the document you're opening in order to call back to the parent tabs object to update the tab text. This is important for when you want to have multiple lines of text. So again, this is a nice value add compared to a notes client, for example, or even a standard browser tab. Especially if there's a lot of information, and as users are clicking around, they know exactly what this document is. It doesn't just say, used car, or if they have a couple cars open, which are Tahoe 2-wheel drive, but okay, they don't know what year that one is that they opened. So just some helpful information there. Okay, so this is a good one. Again, another little placeholder. So, often in an application, your application is sending out emails or other types of messages to people that lets them know they need to come back into the application and process or look at some information. So we have the ability to do that here too. And I do that by creating a particular link that links to a specific XPage, and it passes the doc ID that I want to open. So, again, this is a method that is used inside of our production application every day. We've probably gotten more away from sending emails with links like this in them, and there's an internal alerting system inside the application, which tends to handle a lot of that since users are inside the application all day. But before we do that, at the about level, so again, on this iframe, the first iframe inside of the main page here, you can see in the console, it says polling for open docs. So there is a timer set that just every 5 seconds, it's looking for a local storage variable. And if it finds it, it attempts to open that document and then clears out the variable. So let's take a look at that in action here. So something interesting here. I already had the configuration document open. So you can see, even though I clicked that link to open it, it didn't need to create that. The tab manager knew it existed or found it when it was told to open it. And all it did was activate the existing configuration document. So if I were to close this and do this again, it would open it fresh. And there we have it. Okay, the final example I want to show here, again, just another placeholder to remind me to go over this, is one of the important things to make this work properly is sizing of the iframe. So thank goodness for Flexbox and being able to apply flexible layouts to elements. Prior to that, prior to using Flexbox, there would be a manual computation done to figure out, okay, how big do I need to make this iframe? And then using JavaScript, the iframe, the height of the iframe would be set. And then you had to account for, well, what if the user changes their browser size? They go full screen or get out of full screen. The iframe would not automatically size based on that. So you had a listener for that to say, okay, did the screen change? Okay, recompute that. But now having Flexbox as the layout makes things much easier. So if I inspect, so if we move up here, you can really get a feel for what this layout looks like here. So here's our main page. Okay, so we have a flex body class. All it's doing is hiding the overflow. And then we have our about iframe, or what I'm calling the about module. You can see we have some styles applied to that. So we're applying a flexible style to the iframe itself. And then inside of the iframe, again, we're applying the flex body class to the body. And then there's a bunch of other flexible classes that are part of that tabs.css, which help control the layout of everything. And then again, all of our iframes here kind of stacked up. It's a lot of iframes. At first, it can seem a little overwhelming and a little unwieldy, but everything seems to work nicely, and we really do not have any problems with it. This is a self-sufficient solution that does not require any changes or tweaking anymore, and it's been that way for years at this point. So let me pop back into the presentation. So I had a link here. You see, hopefully I'll have some sort of link here where you will be able to see all this stuff on your own, should you want to. Yeah, I had another. This is an important part of this. So, and we learned this lesson the hard way early on, many years ago at this point, where at the time, and I forget which version we were on, it may have been 8.5.3 at the time, but this value is set to 4 by default. And so we had users that were opening a bunch of documents, and all of a sudden they would go back to the first document and everything would stop working. And we're like, what's going on here? And it finally, kind of dawned on us that this was the problem, basically. The server was trashing that first document as they were opening subsequent documents. So it's important, if someone is using this type of application framework, specifically with XPages, that you make sure that your server can handle it. Otherwise, you're going to find users where their server-side actions just are going to stop working. Now, it's not a problem if you're using a, you're not relying on the server piece of things at all, and everything is just REST services and that type of stuff. But if you are relying on server-side actions in any way and relying on the server to maintain the state of your page, then it's very important. Okay, so circling back to our description here. So again, using XPages and Bootstrap tabs to build a monolithic single-page application of micro front-ends. So micro front-end application. Flex tabs makes it easy to break an application down into modules with independent parallel development occurring without disrupting other modules. Check mark next to that. We accomplished that with the flexible tabs. Single page application. Flex tabs functions within one browser tab. Check. Then finally, monolithic application. This might be a little bit of a stretch, but in our case, all of our code lives within one NSF. So from that standpoint, it's kind of a monolithic application because you can build. Someone could introduce some new code into the build, like Java or something, and break stuff. So we're going to put a check mark next to that. So that is how we build an application that contains each of these three different types of application frameworks. And I think we're getting close to time here. So thank you everybody for watching. I appreciate your time. I hope you found it as interesting as I found building it over the course of years. And again, just want to call attention to our sponsors who are instrumental in us as developers having the ability to get together and have conferences like this. And so finally, are there any questions? And I can check the chat here and see if there are any questions because we do have a couple minutes. Okay, so from Colin, let's see here. How do you handle cases where a tabbed iframe HTTP request returns HTTP 401 unauthorized? Well, we don't really do anything with it. The user would see the 401 error page displayed. So, and we do experience that from time to time, especially if we get new users in different departments and they might not have access to a particular database. Why is this data about cars, not alcoholic drinks? Well, maybe the next one will be about alcoholic drinks. So Jesse, I agree. Everything is Philly based. So I see there's a lot of conversation going on in the chat. But I think that does it for questions. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording and stop the session. Again, everybody, thank you. I very much appreciate your time.